Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, and welcome to Crabtree Lane Gardens.
So, can we start by saying when you first came here, how long ago was it that you first moved here?
We moved here in 1976, that very hot summer. We moved up from Cambridgeshire. Where you are sitting now was just a horse's paddock, but it was the land that attracted us to this property, not particularly the bungalow. And we had visions in our mind of what we wanted to do.
And in fact, this tree in front of us was there from the beginning, wasn't it?
Soon after. We first bought it quite probably about 1980. We had it in various places, at the front of the house and the back of the house by the patio. But both times my father, who was a gardener, said it's going to go too big and it's too close to the house. So when we decided to change the planting from vegetables to flowers, which we did in the mid-1980s, this was the first tree that we planted.
And what type is it?
It's a blue spruce. Lovely tree. Suffers a bit because of the prevailing wind. If you get right at the back, you can see there's a lot more growth on one side than the other. But I love it, and it's the focal point of the garden.
So, can we just now go on to how did you get involved with the open garden scheme?
We have opened the garden for the church, the Scouts and various other societies in Burscough, and we did that for many years. And then when Sandra retired, which is now 15 years ago, we'd been approached about opening, and we then decided that then was the time. She had much more time. I was still working, but the garden was always lovely, but it was not as pristine as we would have liked it for the National Garden Scheme.
And what's the coverage of the garden?
3/4 of an acre. The field part, what we call the field part, which was the horse's paddock when we moved in, was measured on the plans at exactly half an acre. And then there's the garden round the house and the bungalow, so it's about 3/4 of an acre all told.
So should we go and have a look at some of your exhibits now?
Yes, there's some lovely plants that are at their best at this time of the year.
So what's this flower looking at, Peter?
This is Veratrum nigrum. This comes from all across the northern hemisphere in woodland and damp conditions. You can see the black variety nigrum. At the back we have the white variety that doesn't flower nearly so prolifically as the nigrum, but they are both very slow to multiply. These have been in almost since we started this garden, 30 years. To now we've got to 6 spikes, so from 1 to 6 in getting on for 30 years.
Slow growers?
Yes, very slow to multiply.
And the leaf is very nice as well.
It is. A lot they grow just for the leaf. If you look down on it in its early stages in May time, the whole way it furls is beautiful to look at. Slugs love it.
Right, so what have we got here now, Peter?
This is Phytolacca americana, also commonly known as the American pokeweed. This seeds all around the garden very easily. The flower is a lovely pink. You can just see at the tip, the pink. That whole piece is pink. Then it becomes green, and then it finally ends up as the black seeds. The birds love the seeds. They pass through the birds, and you will see it seeded right throughout the garden. Once you have it, it's very easy to keep.
So what garden are we in now, Peter?
We're now into what we either call the Mediterranean or the gravel garden. And all the flowers in here, and it's more for structure and leaf than for colour. A lot of these are tender, which we take in during the winter. But this little area in this corner, we've planted up with things that have got that little bit different, and we think fit in with the more exotic plants. And this one here is Crinum poellii. It's a bulb, and we've had this now 3 years, and you can see we have 4 flowers on it this year. There was 8 bulbs in here 3 years ago when we first planted it, but it's a lovely flower, very similar to the lily.
So do you have to take some of these in the winter then, put them inside?
Yes, anything you see in here goes in the winter to the big greenhouse or the polytunnel, depending on how hardy they are. But all these will be left, except the tree fern. The tree fern is small enough still to be able to move around. Yeah, this is a Millenii transparent. Now, the far side of this garden is very much the exotics and Mediterranean palms, etc. This side we try and do structure plants, and grasses are very spectacular, particularly when you've got the wind blowing through them.
The noise as well, isn't it?
You get the noise from them, you get the blowing in the wind, so you've got the being able to see them, and later on, after the seed has set, we'll leave it all through the winter for the birds as well. The other grass we've got in here is Miscanthus sinensis morning light. Now this flowers much later on in the season, but we also grow it as much for the variegated foliage. You've got your green and your white stripes within it. So again, it is very striking structure to go with the Mediterranean plants.
And these two can stay out all winter, can they?
These will stay out all winter. In the spring they'll get cut down to a few inches, and they will come again every year.
Now what do we have here, Peter?
This bed is all woodland plants. They like the damp, shaded conditions that we've got here for them. And the particular ones we're looking at the moment are the Roscoas. These are ones we leave out here in the winter, but in certain parts of the country they're not hardy. The root is something like an asparagus when you see it, but they flower late on, and you've got 2 varieties here. There's the purple one with the purple leaf and the yellow one. We like them. They clump up well, and we have 1 or 2 of them round the garden, not just in the woodland, but in the herbaceous as well, where they fit.
Lovely flowers.
They are lovely flowers, yes, quite unusual. They're almost orchid-like flower, the way they are. But they fit in here nice, and with the dark leaf. Something a bit different at this time of the year.
So where are we now, Peter?
We're in what we have now had to start calling the railway side garden. We used to call it the railway garden until somebody at one of our open days said, "Where's our railway?" so they could have a ride. And we'd never thought of it, but yes, just calling it a railway garden, people would expect to see our own little train. But right next door we have the Southport to Wigan train line, so it's now called the railway side garden. And it's a real herbaceous garden which is packed with colour right throughout the year, from starting in May with things like the astrantias right through until the autumn, where now we're seeing all the phlox in all their glory, and then we will start getting a few second flowering. But the plant we're particularly looking at the moment is the Burscough. This is from southern Africa, quite hardy, comes in this very pale mauve, white and yellow. You don't see it around very often, but I think it's quite spectacular. In May time you have to be careful not to pull it up as a thistle.
Yeah, I was going to say that, because there's a piece down here that looks very much like a thistle.
It does, and when it first comes through it's even more like a thistle, so we know we have this patch of them here. So we're always extremely careful what we do and don't pull up at when we're first preparing the beds early on in the season.
So what are we looking at now, Peter?
We're still in the railway side garden, but now we're looking at the lovely white tree lilies. They're very structured, stand up, very tall and straight, don't need staking, and these are the white ones. Earlier on in the year we had the pink stargazer varieties, and these white ones contrast lovely with the very dark mauve clematis in the background.
Very striking.
They are very striking, and with the low growing herbaceous plants in the bottom, they stand out very much so. These we quite probably only started with a couple many years ago and have multiplied, and you've got these here right the way across there. Now here we've actually still got one of the lilies we were just talking about, stargazer, but the real thing spectacular we're looking at here is the phlox. This time of the year phlox are beautiful, and you've got all kinds of colours going right through, from white through to almost very dark red. These are both mauve. You've got the light one and you've got the darker one.
What are the yellow ones at the back?
The yellow are Rudbeckia, and they contrast lovely with the mauve in the front of them. And then right at the very back, and that is protection from the railway, is a bamboo.
So what are we looking at now, Peter?
Right, still in the railway side garden, this is a willow gentian. Most unusual that a gentian is nearly 2 foot tall, because the normal gentians are a few inches.
Oh, really?
That's all. This plant we got from a garden in Scotland many years ago, and it's really multiplied, and it's a very vivid blue at this time of the year. We love it.
We're alongside one of your lovely ponds here, Peter. Which garden is this we're in now?
This is what we call the goldfish pond and the rockery. This was the second area that we changed from vegetables, which we had when we first moved here, to what you see now. This was all dug by our sons by hand. One of the downsides on the garden is it's very flat. So what we have got behind me is the rockery, which was all the soil that we dug out from this pond. The pond is almost 3 foot deep. So we have at the back of us 3 or 4 foot of soil. My eldest son Michael built all the wall around it, so we've now got a lovely rockery, waterfall and the goldfish pond, which is only got a few goldfish in at the moment. We had the herons that decimated them a few months ago, but we have found a lot of small fish in, so hopefully in the next couple of years they will build up again.
Now we're standing in front of the autumn garden, is that correct?
That's right, we call it our autumn hotbed. All reds, yellows, hot colours. This comes into its own from mid-July right through until the first frosts in October. We've got dahlias, helenium, cannas, and hopefully later on we get gingers to flower.
The colours are lovely.
Yes, they've all been bought for that reason. The dahlias, you've got your vivid red of Bishop of Llanduff, and you've got your cactus, black narcissi. You've then got the yellow helenium, and the red helenium has just gone over, and you've got the red monarda and the red phlox in the background.
So have you got any ideas for the garden in the future? Any new things coming along?
No, we have decided that we are getting a little bit older now, so we're not going to be doing any major changes. We will have replanting in places when things start to get tired, but we don't anticipate changing the structure of the garden.
Well, it's a full-time job anyway, isn't it?
It is, yes. We both love it, and we will carry on doing it as long as we can. We're already planning for next year's openings. We're going to be opening twice, in middle of May and middle of June, and we have private visits already booked for next year. So things carry on. That'll be year 16. Hopefully we can get to year 20, which will be a lovely achievement in our eyes.
Well, thank you, Peter, for letting me see the garden and letting me do this interview, and I hope it goes from strength to strength. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for coming.
That's great.